This video is going to walk you through reading the article, the Swazi 11. You're going to want your article packet, and you'll also want your notes packet. But we're going to start with the article packet. I'm going to read this out loud and take some notes as I go so that you fully understand what's happening in this story. So this story is called the Swazi 11. As I make notes, please pause the video and do the same notes on your page. Please read along with your article as I read aloud the Swazi 11. Tom French, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, spent 6 years studying zoos and wrote about his experiences in his book, Zoo Story. His book opens with the story of 11 elephants who were taken from Swaziland in Africa and flown to zoos in San Diego and Tampa. San Diego is a big city in California, and Tampa is in Florida. It was August 21st, 2003, on a Thursday morning. The elephants were in the hold of the plane in crates. Some of them were sleeping on their sides, others were awake and drinking water. Mick Riley was with them. He and his father ran the Makaya and Helene game reserves in Africa, where the elephants had lived. Mick had grown up with these elephants. "It's not so bad," Mick told the elephants as he refilled their water. There are 2 notes that I'd like you to make in that paragraph. The first is, please note that the word game is referring to animals, and the word reserves is protected land. And it's important to note that this is not a zoo, because we're going to be reading all about zoos, and in this article, reserves are not zoos. Okay, the next paragraph. Mick was tired. It had been a long fight to get the elephants on this flight. Animal rights activists had tried to stop the elephants from going to zoos. Groups like Born Free and PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, filed a lawsuit and wrote angry letters. The government and even the local newspapers of Swaziland had blamed Mick and his father for sending the elephants to zoos. Mick was upset. Didn't people understand? The elephants couldn't stay on the land. So this paragraph is telling us that the elephants are going from these reserves in Swaziland to zoos in America. The next paragraph. There were too many elephants living in the Makaya and Helene game reserves. They were ruining the land. Elephants eat for up to 18 hours a day. When they eat, they tear bark off trees and even knock trees down. Elephants had destroyed so many trees that a big part of the parks was now only black and dead trees. So this paragraph is talking about the reserves where the elephants were living, and it's important to note that they said there were too many elephants on those reserves, and because there were too many of them, they were ruining the land. They were tearing bark off of trees and knocking trees down, so they're destroying the trees that are on the land, and the trees were now black and dead. Let's go on to the last paragraph on that page. Animals like eagles, owls, and vultures had no place to nest. In addition, the black rhino, one of Africa's most endangered species, also needed the trees to eat. Now the rhino had no food. If the situation continued, many animals and plants would be wiped out. So this really shows a cause and effect relationship, that there are too many elephants, and because there's too many elephants, the trees are dying because the elephants are eating, they're ruining the land, the trees are getting knocked down, and because the trees are dying, it's affecting the eagles and the owls and the vultures that live in the trees, It's affecting the black rhino that also needs to eat the trees. So we have a big cause and effect here of too many elephants leading to a negative effect on the other plants and animals in that area. Please turn to the back of the page that says 1B on the bottom. Mick and his father tried to find another park nearby, but South Africa was overrun with elephants. Overrun means that there are so many of them, they're taking over. No park could take any more. The Rileys looked in other places in Africa, but there was a threat of poaching. They did not want their elephants to be shot as trophies and have their tusks sold on the black market. Poaching is when animals are hunted illegally. So people would hunt the elephants when they were not supposed to be. The second paragraph. In other parks, rangers had killed elephants to make sure the population stayed low. Mick didn't want to kill his elephants. I'm going to pause here and explain this paragraph a little bit. I am not a hunter, but from what I understand with deer hunting is that when the population of the deer gets so large, deer hunting actually helps to keep the population in check, because when the hunters kill the deer, then the deer that survive are able to continue to thrive and grow. They have enough food and they're not fighting for food and territory. So this is kind of the same idea that in some of the parks, there's so many elephants that because there's so many, if it would continue, then like all of the elephants would end up suffering. But some of the rangers were killing some of the elephants to lower the population so that the elephants that remained would be able to continue to live and they would still have enough food instead of all of the elephants running out of food and starving. Okay, the next paragraph. Of course, none of this was the elephant's fault in the first place. In Swaziland, as in other parts of Africa, elephants have struggled to survive. Humans have taken so much land in Africa and occupy so much space that most animals are confined inside game parks. Remember, this is different than zoos. 50 years ago, there weren't even any elephants in Swaziland. They had all died or been killed off by hunters. Mick's father, Ted, tried to help. He built 3 parks to protect endangered species. The elephants arrived in 1987, and they survived so well in the parks, there were soon too many of them. Again, this is a good cause and effect paragraph showing that humans caused this problem because they moved in, then there wasn't enough space for elephants, but then they built parks for the elephants, and then there were too many elephants. Humans had created this problem. Now it was up to humans to fix it. Zoos were the only option. I'd like you to underline that sentence, because remember, we want to be focusing on zoos in this lesson. On this plane, I'm giving them a chance, Mick thought. Before his family had agreed to send the animals to zoos, Mick had visited the zoos and talked to the zookeepers. He saw that the elephants would be treated well and given as much space as possible. He said the animal clinic at the San Diego Zoo was better than any hospital in Swaziland. The zoos offered to pay $12,000 for each elephant, and Mick and his family would use the money to protect the other animals in the park and buy more land for the animals. In these bottom paragraphs, do you see any positive or negative thoughts on zoos? Pause the video and see if you can underline them, and then resume the video and see what I found. So this is what I underlined. I underlined the elephants would be treated well, they're given as much space as possible, and this, the animal clinic at the San Diego Zoo, was better than any hospital in Swaziland. That means the animal clinic is better than the hospitals that humans go to in Swaziland. I also underline that they're going to be given money for the elephants, and that money can then be used to protect the other elephants and get the other elephants more land that are remaining in Swaziland. So all of these things I underlined, and hopefully you found them too, are positive. So I'm going to put a star by these paragraphs and a little smiley face. These are showing positive things about the zoos. Our last page. On August 15th, the courts denied the lawsuit filed by animal rights groups. The elephants would go to the zoos. 4 would go to Tampa to the Lowry Park Zoo, and the other 7 were headed to San Diego. As the plane began its final descent toward Tampa, the elephants were restless. Mick knew the trip could not be easy for them. Surely they would wonder about the strange noises and rumblings around them. Surely they would be confused. He was certain the elephants were hungry after the long flight. Mick went to the elephants and stroked each one. "There's lots of food where you're going."